Sonic Heroes was always going to be a tricky yet interesting game to cover on the channel for a number of reasons. The first being that I skipped its initial release. Yes, despite being a die-hard Sonic fan who was always there day one, I didn't buy Sonic Heroes when it first came out. Sure, I had a PlayStation 2, but I brought home Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Metal Gear Solid 2, Burnout 2, and, Dragon Ball Z Budokai. There was no Sonic in sight. When it arrived in the UK in 2004, Sonic Heroes, alongside Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex, Spyro Enter the Dragonfly, Super Mario Sunshine, and other supposedly kiddie platformers, became the almost exclusive domain of my little brother and his GameCube, while I was busy being a, quote, totally mature 15-year-old. I pretentiously thought I had grown out of Sonic. That means that, despite playing bits of Sonic Heroes here and there over the years, I hadn't actually fully completed the game until I sat down to record footage for this review. It also makes this the first mainline Sonic game that I don't have any rose-tinted glasses or nostalgia for. Wait, have I just outed myself as a fake Sonic fan? Shit. The other reason it's a tricky game to cover is that it's Sonic's first proper multi-platform release after the Dreamcast. Well, you know. Don't worry, we will be doing a version comparison, but for now just know that, while the GameCube had already seen Sonic Mega Collection and both Sonic Adventures, the case art for the Xbox and PlayStation 2 versions proudly proclaimed this was Sonic's debut on their consoles. These were free new audiences that were getting to sample the once elusive Hedgehog. At the same time, while I might have aged out of Sonic at that point, a brand new generation of younger players were coming through the gates. Not only would this be their first experience of a franchise I had loved and praised for years, it might have been one of their first gaming experiences, period. First impressions count, and the gaming world was watching. So, what did Sega do? Give people the quintessential Sonic game? A perfect summation of everything that makes a blue hedgehog unique? No, of course not. They experimented and tried something new. Previous Sonic games had let us play as multiple characters with differing gameplay styles. How could Heroes top that? Well, how about playing as 3 characters at the same time across 4 different teams, taking the total playable character count up to 12. At least the advertising says 12. I'm more inclined to say it's 3 characters which each have 4 skins. Every team is composed of a speed, flight, and power character. The speed character closely resembles Sonic and Shadow's gameplay from Adventure 1 and 2. You run fast, you jump, you have a wonky and unreliable homing attack, a spin dash thing that I never really got to grips with, and a light speed dash to follow trails of rings. New to this is a very anime energy wall jump that is the definition of situational, but hardly the game's greatest sin. The flight character is slow and steady. They can jump higher. I would say they can fly, but it's more hovering than anything. And they attack by tossing their curled up allies at enemies, a move that absolutely destroys the quotation marks final boss. This is probably the character I used the least. Their speed, or lack thereof, just kept bringing things to a halt, especially in the half-pipe special stages. Finally, the power character can break rocks, walls, and doors open. They can use fans to gain height, which doesn't seem particularly fitting. Switching to them puts the characters side by side, which can be useful for grabbing parallel sets of rings, and as the brawler of the team, they're the only ones who can damage armoured enemies. Now, it might be reductive to say that these teams and characters are identical. In the speed category alone, Amy lacks the light speed dash and wall jump, while Espio can turn invisible to sneak past enemies. In the power camp, while Knuckles and newcomer Omega do a 3-hit combo on the ground and shoot their allies at foes while airborne, Big and Vector shoot their allies at foes from the ground and do body slams from the air. For flight, Charmy is the only one who can talk to warp flowers, I guess? The other key difference between how each team plays is how their screen-clearing Team Blast attack works. In short, a meter builds as you play, and when it's full, you can use a screen nuke to skip combat sections. Team Rose gains temporary invincibility after using theirs. Team Dark invokes Chaos Control, freezing everything, which can be super inconvenient in a situation with fans or moving platforms. Meanwhile, Team Chaotix has a throwback to Vector's concept art origins as a member of Sonic's Cut sound test band, which gets rings from every enemy killed. This is hilariously broken in the enemy gauntlet boss fights, as each use of the Team Blast gets you enough rings to refill the bar, allowing you to spam the move and easily see ring counts in the 800s as a result. Team Sonic's is just a screen nuke with seemingly no other effects or benefits. This is just the start of a weird trend where Team Sonic, the game's cover stars, are perhaps the least interesting threesome to talk about. Being able to switch characters on the fly and having such a large moveset means that this Sonic game, in a lot of ways, goes against the core design principles of Sonic. The design philosophy of Sonic has always been built around simplicity. The Mega Drive games were played with a D-pad and a single button. That one button handled not just jumping, but also shield powers, flying, and gliding. Anyone could pick up a Mega Drive Sonic as their first video game and play it without issue. That simply cannot be the case here. You have a jump button, a contextual action button for attacking, light speed dashing, and interacting with switches, a Team Blast button, a button to switch characters to the left, and another button to switch characters to the right. That's a lot to get to grips with, and even as an experienced gamer, I encountered an adjustment period. I found that several hours and campaigns in, I was still switching to the wrong leader. Given this game was being presented to new audiences and actively marketed to children who might not have played a video game before, I can't agree this level of complexity was a good move. Even once you get used to the controls, it can be very fiddly in the sense that character movement is twitchy and loose. I mentioned the unreliable homing attack, but anytime I switched to Knuckles, I exclusively used his aerial attacks because, on the ground, his punches accelerate him off the edge of the stage. When flight characters run out of energy, they just drop like a stone. They don't come down in a natural arc. You'll try to pull a switch only for the character to attack instead. The rail grinding, I'll just let the footage speak for itself. There are even multiple set pieces where you don't have control that can go wrong and kill you. I don't trust the game. I can't get comfortable behind the wheel. Special mention goes to the casino boards, where it constantly felt like I was fighting an invisible magnetic force. It is, without a doubt, the single most frustrating point of the game, and because each team visits the same zones, I had to endure this agony 4 times. Granted, Sonic Adventure 2 also had a contextual action button, and I bashed its slippery controls for many of the same reasons. I can't claim these problems started in Heroes. It's just disappointing to see that Sonic Team didn't learn from or refine that. If anything, they made the problem worse. While every character has a clearly defined role, and they are linked together well, for example, Flight using Thundershoot to bring a flying enemy to the ground level for the power character to then destroy, an increased focus on combat, giving enemies health bars for the first time, and character-specific challenges gives the pacing a stop-start feeling which prevents me from ever getting into a flow state. In Adventure 1, I played one character's story at a time. I could focus solely on their mechanics and have fun mastering them. Adventure 2 made me switch characters every level or two, but that was tolerable. Here, it's a new extreme, an interference that I'm glad Sonic Team has never returned to. If I were to boil my frustration down, it's that Sonic has always accommodated the way you want to play it. Want to speed through? Fine. Want to explore? Also fine. Want to fight the enemies? The game's happy either way. It's a series that's always given us options and relative freedom. I think that's a key part of its mass appeal. Meanwhile, Sonic Heroes continuously stops the player in their tracks and says, no, you have to play me in this specific way. That's just not Sonic to me. That's not to say Sonic Team didn't intend or try to accommodate multiple playstyles and skill levels. While previous games used each character to provide a different experience and part of the story, Sonic Heroes mostly uses its teams as difficulty levels. In the history of Sonic the Hedgehog, Takashi Iizuka is quoted as saying,
"Our aim was for players of all levels to have fun with the team of their choice, and to give them the feeling of living a full adventure. Beginners should start with Team Rose, while experts should choose Team Dark."
That matches Oma Chow's description of each team.
Team Dark stages are more difficult and recommended for the intermediate players. Team Rose is recommended for those who are new to action games.
This largely holds true. Team Rose is the only team that starts with an explicit and painfully slow tutorial stage. Their levels are considerably shorter, being 3 or 4 minutes each compared to the 15 minutes some of the other team's stages can overstay their welcome for. They face weaker versions of enemies in smaller numbers, as well as fewer environmental hazards. It didn't escape my notice that the easy mode is also primarily pink and female. I guess 2004 wasn't as progressive a time, more so in Japan. Now watch me lose subscribers for being too woke. Meanwhile, Team Dark face the strongest versions of enemies in greater numbers earlier on, have trickier platforming sections, and some of the longest stages. While using the homing attack and lightspeed dash to combo your way across enemies and rings provides cool shortcuts as Team Sonic, it can be outright required to progress as Team Dark. It's one of the many reasons I find them to be the most satisfying team to play as overall. Team Sonic occupies a medium slot, and in a lot of ways their playthrough is kind of bland and unremarkable as a result. Even when we look at their role in the story, Team Sonic are just sort of there. We've established our easy, medium, and hard mode, so where does that leave Team Chaotix? They take on a mission mode. Instead of reaching the end of a stage, they have to collect all of the MacGuffins, kill all of the enemies, or not get spotted by a single foe during the second to last stage. I believe the aim was to provide variety, but it ends up as frustrating tedium. Hang Castle, my least favourite level, ended up being 15 minutes long as I looped back around on myself looking for a key I missed. Sadly, this can be a fairly common occurrence because levels haven't been reworked for Team Chaotix's playstyle. Each team experiences the same levels in the same order, with largely the same geometry. Sure, enemy and object placements as well as the start and end positions change team to team, but by and large you will experience the same set pieces and bosses in the same order 4 times over. This means Chaotix are trying to complete these objectives in levels that were primarily designed for getting from point A to point B in a linear run. These missions have been retrofitted and feel like a hastily thrown together afterthought. You'll often have no idea where the thing you missed is, and backtracking is so heavily discouraged that there are points of no return. It's awkward, it's messy, it doesn't feel right. On the plus side, maybe Sonic Team would learn from this mistake and not repeat this mission-based structure in future titles. Oh, this? Entirely coincidence. Don't know why I'm holding it. Now, if it were just difficulty levels, a lot of these criticisms wouldn't be as valid. However, either the whole team didn't share that vision, or Iizuka flat out lied. See, he also said,
"The different stories do not have an influence on each other."
Evidence supporting Iizuka's claim is that each team's playthrough is very similar, and you will get deja vu. No single playthrough is missing any key story beats. Sure, Chaotix discovered a real Robotnik, but we already knew that Neo Metal Sonic was pretending to be the good doctor from this cutscene that every team experiences a version of. You could cut the majority of these plot points and not lose anything. Hell, you could cut the whole game from canon and lose very little. At first, the story might seem more significant than it actually is. Metal Sonic is back in a new Neo form. He's taken over Robotnik's forces. He's gathering lifeform data from various sources, including kidnapping Froggy to get Chaos's info to make himself more powerful. It's the robot's rebellious phase. Despite this, by the end of the story, Metal is back in his base form, exactly as he was in Sonic CD. You could skip this game without consequence, if not for Shadow. Shadow fell from orbit at the end of Sonic Adventure 2 and was presumed dead. Despite this, Rouge finds an amnesiac Shadow in a capsule at the start of Heroes. Now, the game plays hot and cold with whether this is a real Shadow, a robot, or a clone, and this plot thread wouldn't be resolved until the next game, appropriately titled Shadow the Hedgehog. It doesn't end there. Heroes introduces Omega and sees the formation of Team Dark as a whole, something that would go on to influence events in Sonic 06. Granted, Sega haven't known what to do with Shadow since 06, leaving him as yet another Vegeta clone. However, Heroes is the first, and if I'm not mistaken, last time the series has dangled sequel bait at us. No, Sonic 3 and Knuckles doesn't count, as that was envisioned as a single release. It only got split in two because of a deadline for a McDonald's promotion. If you want to learn more about that, well, I already did a video on that game which has the details. That said, if you pay attention, there are signs this is the real Shadow. His instinct when he wakes up is to protect Rouge. At the start of Egg Fleet, the word space seems to trigger something in his memory. Neo Metal Sonic says he successfully copied the Ultimate Lifeform data from him while having a broken Shadow robot right there, implying he needed the real deal. You could probably form a conclusion despite the game's misdirections. So just play Team Dark's story and move right along to the next game, Shadow the Hedgehog, yeah? Well, no. The real final boss and true ending of Heroes is locked behind completing each team's story and collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds. The teams also cross paths throughout the story with these contrived battles against each other, which honestly feel like smacking action figures together. At least when the AI doesn't completely break down, before finally joining forces in the finale. These campaigns are very clearly happening in parallel to one another. Given that Team Sonic are the first team you're presented with on the selection screen, and this is his game, the majority of players are probably going to start there. Team Dark's hard mode is next, so by the time you get to Team Rose, their run comes off as kind of patronising, but you still have to do it. Likewise, if Team Chaotic's mission-based structure doesn't appeal to you, tough luck. If I were to redo Heroes, I would have the teams complete the stages in different orders to each other, and instead of making every threesome go through all 7 zones, I would make some zones exclusive or unique to each team, so that there's less repetition. Think of Sonic Adventure 2's overworld map. You can see the routes each character took to the Ark, and they're divergent. Place the Egg Fleet in the centre of a map, while starting each trio at a different compass point around the edge, and we could have something similar. I'd also do more with the story. Neo Metal Sonic can shapeshift. He's pretending to be Robotnik for the bulk of the runtime, and he's already framed Sonic for kidnapping Chocola and Froggy. You could do so much more with that. Granted, Sonic getting blamed for someone else's crimes was already done in the previous game, the military mistaking him for Shadow, so maybe that's why they didn't go that route. Just imagine though, Neo Metal infiltrating one of the teams, maybe even playing most of Team Sonic's campaign, only to have it revealed that you've been playing as Metal this whole time as he traps Knuckles and Tails, possibly switching to another team to rescue them. I'm not saying every Sonic game has to have an epic, over-the-top anime plot a la Adventure, but I can't help but look at this game's story and see so much wasted potential. Given my complaints, you could make the argument that the last story simply isn't worth unlocking or playing, as it's just an underwhelming boss fight where you have to spam Team Blasts against whatever this eldritch abomination is. After which, Neo Metal Sonic reverts back to his regular old self, as if this story never happened. And yes, it does irritate me that Tails and Knuckles don't get proper super forms for this fight, despite having had those forms in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, thanks to Mr. Only Male Hedgehogs Can Go Super, I hate this franchise's legacy, Izuka. This argument gets stronger when you look at those Chaos Emerald requirements. To get into the Special Zone, you have to find a key in a normal stage and bring it to the end. If you take a single hit, you'll lose the key. In a game where the levels can last up to 15 minutes, and enemies will attack you off-screen or appear out of literal thin air, you can't get hit. Oh, and you only get to go for the Emerald in Act 2. If you bring the key to the end of Act 1, you're playing for extra lives, not an Emerald. The gems are also strictly one per zone. You can't cheese it by repeating Ocean Palace over and over again. They're also shared between teams. If you get an Emerald as Team Sonic, then get the key to the end of the same stage as Team Dark, you'll be playing for the exact same Emerald. You can't spread it out that way either. And this is all for an attempt at these rocks, which is in a wonky 3D version of the classic half-pipe with incredibly sensitive controls and plenty of bombs to avoid. Let's not kid ourselves. Most of us will have done this as Team Rose, simply because they have the shortest stages with the fewest enemies. I will say, it's not the worst Emerald challenge in the series, far from it, but it is needlessly restrictive. As an aside, Shadow uses the green Emerald to invoke Chaos Control during Team Dark's Team Blast, even if another team has already collected that Emerald, or you haven't gotten any of them yet. Is Shadow using a fake, like the one Tails made in Adventure 2? Is this just an oversight? Or am I overthinking this? You'd be forgiven for thinking that all this rambling means I hate Sonic Heroes. I don't! There are some things that I actually like about the game. The presentation and art design are great. The levels are imaginative and each one has a gimmick that, Hang Castle aside, provides fun and interesting variety. For example, the frogs in Frog Forest who can create new platforms. Generally speaking, the game is beautiful. It's vibrant, colourful, and the environments have not only a clear sense of identity, but also scope. They feel huge. There's brilliant sense of verticality. Bouncing from ship to ship against the Egg Fleet Armada feels triumphant. We're at the enemy's door and we're smashing it down. Seaside Hill is so pleasing to look at that it keeps getting reused in later games, and while Sonic 2's Metropolis is a zone most people hate, Grand Metropolis in Heroes is an absolutely stunning highlight, both visually and from a gameplay perspective. There are even some really nice story hints in the environments. For example, this statue of Robotnik in Hang Castle actually shows Neo Metal Sonic when the stage is flipped upside down. That's some really nice yet subtle foreshadowing that most people won't even notice. We start to see a shift in art direction for the characters too. They more closely resemble what many call the modern interpretations with their new in-game models. I call this the motorcycle helmet. The prominent brows of the hedgehogs have all but disappeared, and the eye area has gotten much bigger. We associate large eyes with youth and cuteness, largely because our own eyes don't grow that much, from about 16.5mm at birth to 24mm as adults. Proportionately, a baby's eyes take up a larger area of their head than an adult's eyes do. We can see characters' muzzles have gotten smaller, ears have gotten bigger, and their facial proportions have completely changed. It's almost chibi, in a way. I always took the adventure designs as Sonic having grown up, even though ages provided by game manuals, Sonic Jam, and official websites say otherwise, and this is reinforced by generations treating classic Sonic as modern Sonic's younger self, regardless of the Force's other dimension retcon. Given how he seemed taller, more slender, with longer quills and limbs, it made a lot of sense. This redesign is much cleaner, and the new facial proportions, especially the lack of a brow, take away some of that implied maturity for me. What's strange is that the official character renders and cutscenes use models which feel closer to adventure. Here they've warped, distorted, and twisted every feature to imply movement and energy, but for me they took the effect a little too far. I think Knuckles comes out the worst, with even his shoes' metal buckles deforming. That's not what that material does! I'm also not a fan of this sort of leathery texture they've plastered on. Hedgehogs have quills, so why are we seeing implied skin? Sorry, this was supposed to be positives, let's course correct, yeah? I was happy to see Chaotix return here, even if Mighty was missing. I didn't have a 32X or their game, but I had read a lot of Sonic the Comic, so seeing them playable blew my mind. I'm guessing the majority of people who played this game back in the day would have had no idea who these guys were though. It gives me similar fuzzies to seeing Mighty and Ray in Sonic Mania Plus, a nice nod to the past. That said, what happens to Vector's voice? Most of the time it's raspy, but in some cutscenes it loses that edge. Take a quick listen.
SBO, don't be silly. Besides, you know our policy. We never turn down work that pays.
Excuse me, miss. I was wondering if I could ask you something.
On the subject of audio, yes, I'm making a segue out of that. The music is legitimately top tier. My edgelord 15-year-old self might not have played much of the game, but I did have this machine and what I'm made of on my MP3 player. That's what we used to listen to music before people had Spotify on their phones. Sure, some of the lyrics are a little cringy, looking at you, title theme, and we can, but I adore them all the same. I think the creative teams managed to capture the vibe and feeling of Sonic pretty much perfectly here, setting the creative design philosophy for future titles. I see a lot of this game's bold, saturated colour palette, cheery lighting, optimism, imagination, and overall cleanliness in Lost World and Generations. It was easiest to appreciate while playing the PC version, which can run at 1280 by 960, 60 FPS, compared to the PS2's somewhat pitiful 480i 30 FPS. Yes, it's version comparison time! I managed to get both the Xbox and GameCube versions to display 480p 60 FPS. I'm told the Xbox version can go to 720p, but I wasn't able to enable that on my PAL console. If someone knows what I'm missing, please let me know. I did notice minor differences between Xbox and GameCube, such as a missing particle effect in the Team Blast on Nintendo's console that gave the Xbox a very slight edge. Control-wise, I did have to remap the PC's bindings to use my Xbox Series controller, but it thankfully remembered my settings. While I'm not usually a fan of the GameCube controller, I have to admit its face button layout felt extremely ergonomic for this game, almost as if the team designed the controls around this specific pad, which, to be fair, might have been the case given they ported the adventure games beforehand and would have been familiar with the controller. The Xbox version is also playable on 360 and, bar some slowdown during cutscenes and some visual oddities during loading screens, it plays absolutely fine. There is a PS2 Classics version for PS3, however it's just emulation of the frankly pathetic PlayStation 2 outing. No bumps to frame rate or resolution here, and the HUD looks particularly disgusting. Of course, the GameCube version can be played on the backwards compatible Wii, and the experience is essentially identical to playing on a GameCube. This gives us 7 legal and officially supported ways to experience Heroes, and, to be honest, as long as you avoid the PlayStation which, and I say this as a supposed Sony fanboy, really lets the side down, you can't really go wrong. I'd probably pick the PC as my overall favourite and recommendation for that 960p output, bearing in mind you will need a fan mod to run the disc on Windows 10 and 11, but yeah, very similar experience all around. Sonic Heroes is a weird one. It's not what I wanted or expected. I think it's a great representation of Sonic's vibe and aesthetic, but a terrible representation of Sonic's core gameplay. I don't hate it, I find myself rather indifferent to it. I'm not sure it's a game I would be in a hurry to go back to or replay though. I have very mixed feelings. If nothing else, I can see why Sonic Team didn't return to this formula after this brief experiment. Sales data from Sonic Retro puts the game at just over 2 million copies, but without reliable data for Sonic Adventure 2, it's hard to see how it compared with the rest of the franchise or Sega's internal expectations. Critically, the PS2 version comes in with an unsurprisingly low Metacritic average of 64, while the Xbox version has the highest rating at 73. The game scores an average of 68.75% across all 4 releases. It's worth noting the user scores are higher, with an average of 7.6 out of 10. We know Sega would change tactic and direction again for their next game, Shadow the Hedgehog. From the limited evidence we have, I assume Heroes performed under expectations. Again, the gaming world was watching, and, in a lot of respects, Sega fumbled the ball. The impression I'm left with is that, due to the variety of new audiences this game would be presented to, Sega tried to make a game that would cater to and please everyone, resulting in a confused title that didn't strike a chord with anyone. You know, except the people who already wrote a comment defending the game about 30 seconds into this video. And as for Shadow, the next game in the mainline Sonic series, stick around. You might just be surprised by what I have to say about it. Thanks to Nick, aka The Game Apologist, for voicing the Iizuka quotes. He's a great guy who makes awesome content, including his non-Sonic stuff, and if you're not already subscribed to him, you absolutely should be. Who am I kidding? If you know who I am, you definitely already know who Nick is.